Okay, all right. Good evening, everyone, once more. Today we are welcome to Next College, and of course we continue from where we started. In our previous videos, we have been able to look at classes. We've been able to look at the basics of web, and we looked at the HTML part of it. We also looked at the CSS. We said HTML hypertext markup language actually defines the structure of the web, right? And the CSS part of it talks about the styling. It beautifies the web. And there is something that is remaining from the whole concept. And before I do this, I want us to be able to check our website again. Okay. So looking at our website, we can agree that there is something happening here at the bottom. All right. Notice what is happening. Okay, at some interval, this image is going to, of course, slide. All right. So there are a lot of functionalities here that we need to look at. Okay, let me just log in, log out. Okay. So this is like a demo app for us. Okay. So if I want to sign in, I have to click sign in, right? Okay. Now I can be able to sign in here, right? There are a lot of emails, or this one is, okay. So we can be able to sign in from here. But if I click this button, something will happen, right? Something will happen. And I can be able to even click forgot password. I can be able to do what? Enter something here, hit forgot password, and something will also happen, right? So that's basically what we are going to look at today, all right? Web pages by default are like a blog site, okay? The olden web pages, there is no user interaction. All these things, we see that there are things happening because the user is interacting with the page. And of course, there are ones that happen by default. They are just happening. You see this one, I'm not clicking anything. It is just there, all right? So I was saying that this web page, something is happening, right, by default. But some of them, you need to click or scroll. You have seen application that when you scroll up, something pops up, or when you scroll down, something pops up, right? There are a lot of things that happens on web application. And that is where we come back to the kind analogy I used when we were starting, the building analogy, right? The materials are like the HTML coming together in the site. CSS, you now define the layout, the foundation, and you now chuck in blocks. After everything, you roof. This is where the window is, doors, and the rest of them. Now, there is no light in the house, okay? Nothing is there, okay? So we need to add life to that particular house. We need a way to add light, okay? That is life, okay? Something that we can interact with and something happens, okay? The bulbs are not just there on 24 hours. If you switch on the light, something happens. If you switch it off, something happens. The same thing with the television, it's not always on, okay? So it's not just static there, it is dynamic because you can actually switch it off, it goes off. Same thing with your freezer, same thing with a lot of things in the house that makes it lively, okay? That is the interaction we are talking about. A web page that reacts to interaction has something special that others don't have. And that thing it has is what we call a language, or let me say JavaScript in our own case. So you might wonder, what is JavaScript? And I believe from our introduction, we have already talked about it, but it wasn't in details like that, okay? So JavaScript is just a language, okay? I want you to see it as a language. Now, language, we know what language is. We human beings, we have our own language. Machines, they have their own language. There is a way machines interact with each other, and they don't speak English. They don't speak Igbo, Hausa, Europe. So they have to devise a way to speak, communicate with each other. And that is the language we are talking about. Language of the machine. We have different languages that we can use on machines, right? We can talk here of Ruby, Python, Java, JavaScript, C++, a lot of them, okay? These are different ways of communication. And I gave you an example that you speaking English, you say come. Someone speaking Hausa saying zo, and someone speaking Igbo saying bia, right? You guys are saying the same thing, right? But in different languages, okay? So we're going to focus on JavaScript because we are dealing with Vercel pipeline. And if you are talking of Vercel, we are talking of the main reason, which is Next.js, which operates on what? JavaScript, okay? JavaScript is the language of the web, right? It is the language of the web, and is the most popular, and of course, is the best for front-end web development. So that is what we are focusing on. So we are looking at 3 different categories that defines a web now. First of all, we're looking at what? We're looking at HTML, right? By now, you know what it does for us. Secondly, we talk of the CSS. By now, you are very clear about CSS. The third thing becomes a language, okay? In our case, JavaScript. By now, it is not clear because even though I told you I've showed you some of the things, you still doubting and it's still not clear. And that is the focus of today's class, all right? So JavaScript is like the brain, okay? You see it as the brain box of the machine, okay? The brain of the application. Let me say the brain of the application, okay? Like HTML defines the structure, CSS defines the style. JavaScript talks about the logic, the business logic of the application, or even how interactiveness the web page is, all right? So you have to understand it this way. We have to understand it this way. So JavaScript allows a website or application to think, react, or respond, okay? It allows it to think, react, or respond. What JavaScript does is that on a web page, it is capable of hiding some things. For example, this community, if I click it, something pops up, okay? I can close it, all right? So we can use it to hide elements on the web page, right? You can use it to hide or show elements on the web page, all right? You have done your, you have done a big part of it because you've done responsiveness in web pages, right? So also it can react. It is what offers us the opportunity to respond to a button click, okay? Actions. Even this community is still a button click, okay? So there are things we call actions a user can be able to do on a web page. Anything you do on a web page is regarded as an action. If you scroll down, it is an action. If you scroll up, it's an action. If you click something, it's an action. Even if you hover over something like this, it is what? An action. So anything you do is an action. So it responds to actions. JavaScript responds to what? Action. It is used in form validation, right? We use it in form validation. For example, if I want to register, let me add this thing, okay@gmail.com. Okay, let me just click this. All right. So we have okay@gmail.com here added automatically. Now, if I want to say continue, you see that we are having errors everywhere. All right. This is telling us that some of these fields are required. That is not just happening out of the box. This element, which is in red text, okay, this text which has a color of text, red, right? You see that it wasn't here, right? It wasn't here, but the moment we click this thing, it appears. Okay, so these are the kind of behaviors we are going to be seeing in JavaScript. We use it to calculate values, right? All the you can build calculator that you can use to calculate values, right? Small calculator, increment, decrement, and some other things which we are going to see later, right? Also, we can use it to send and receive data. If this application has been built, of course, it has been built with backend in mind, okay? And these things are stored somewhere in the database, all right? You see that for us to retrieve information from the database, we are going to use JavaScript. HTML cannot do it, CSS cannot do it, right? We need JavaScript to retrieve information and display it on the web page. And of course, you see that when I wanted to, let me say login, these are information I'm entering, right? Data I'm entering. And when I click login here, you see that we are going to send the information to the backend. We are going to send the information to the what? To the backend, which will be saved in the database, right? So we use it to send. It's still JavaScript that can do it. Normal HTML, CSS cannot do it. So a full stack web application demands a backend development, okay? And backend development, we can only build it with JavaScript and some other languages. You can't use just HTML, CSS to build backend. So whenever we are thinking of full stack applications, we must think of a language. We must think of JavaScript. But even at that, you should know that, let me say 98% of applications, let me even say 100%, let me say 99%. You can't have 100%, but let me say 99% of all applications you have now is full stack applications. So it deals with both the front end part and the back end part. Okay? The both front end part and the back end part. So these are the core things we need to know. JavaScript answers a particular question on a web page. And what is that? When something happens, what should the computer do? Okay, what should be done when something happens? So JavaScript on a web page is sitting, right? Waiting for actions that I told you guys. Waiting for what? Actions. If something happens, what should happen? Okay, so you notice that for example, this particular login page, it is waiting for on click. If on click happens, what should happen? Do you understand the thing? So we are going to look at it in a broader way, but just understand the logic like this. Okay, so we can take question now. Toby, your hand was up. Was it Frank? Okay, Frank, you can go ahead.
Okay, my question is there only JavaScript that you can use for front-end development? No other this thing can function on front end. Is it only JavaScript? That's my question.
No, I mentioned it earlier that we have other languages that are capable of handling this, right? That's what I told you guys in our last class, when I was starting, right? We have Python, we have Ruby, there are a lot of languages we can use, but when it comes to languages in Nigeria, we know that there is the official general language, which is like English language, okay? Almost everybody speaks English in this country, right? That is how JavaScript stands in terms of front-end development, okay? That is the position, okay? Does that answer your question?
Okay, so you can, like, somebody can just build with HTML, CSS, and Python for front end?
Yes, but majorly, most of these other languages, they have upper edge in terms of backend development. Okay, JavaScript was built
Okay.
for front end. That is why it
Okay.
existed. Okay.
Okay. Now I understand.
All right. Do we have any other question, or should we proceed? All right. So we can now be able to look at where JavaScript can run. Okay. Where can we run JavaScript? Of course, you have seen it that this particular browser is running it. It is running it. That's why this is moving. Okay. There is JavaScript embedded in this particular page, and this particular browser is executing it. It understands the JavaScript. Okay. It understands it. So it can run in browsers like Chrome, Firefox, Edge, and etc. Okay. So also it can run on server. I don't want us to go to that side. Of course, we are going to look at it later. All right. So we are going to look at Node.js. I don't want to confuse you with all those things, but server side, okay, that is when we are now talking of full stack application. You know, we are still on front end. We are now trying to see how we can build the user interface, right? So we can use JavaScript for this. Okay, when we talk of the backend part, JavaScript can run in server. Okay, even though we are going to look at why anyway in the future. So that is what you know about that. Okay, now I have opened this project, right? And if you can guess, you see that JavaScript is a file. Okay, we have to add a file, which we, of course, we call it what? JavaScript. Okay, so we can say index.js. All right, so we have introduced another extension. Of course, you know about HTML extension. This is what tells the browser that, okay, this is a HTML file. Of course, we also have style.css tells you this is a CSS file. All right. Now we've added another thing which we call JS. Okay, which of course tells that this is a JavaScript file. And in JavaScript file, if I try to put these things, you see this is HTML syntax I'm adding here, right? You see we are having issues already. Okay, we are having issues. That's because this is not how we represent JavaScript. This is not what JavaScript is all about. Okay, we need to know how we can write that. Just like if you copy this particular index.html stuff in CSS, you know it's going to complain, right? Because that's not what the file can do. So we can be able to remove this. And at this point, I also want you to understand why we say that is the brain. Okay, why do we say JavaScript is actually the brain? Okay, what has it come to do with brain? We should be able to analyze what brain does. All right, what does brain do? Okay, we see that our human brain, first of all, how it makes all these decisions and how we will be able to even speak out the way I'm speaking now and everything is because first it stored an information. It was able to receive an information, right? Somewhere in my brain, part of my brain, it stores it there. The first time you start calling mommy, your mother, right? The first time you start calling her that name, it doesn't you didn't just start. You had it, okay? You had it. Someone said it, your brain picked it, stored it somewhere, and assessed it, okay? It was able to process that particular information and give a feedback, okay? it was able to what? Give an output. So you see that that is what is happening. Information has to be received. Information has to be processed. Information has to be what? Given out as an output. All right. That is how JavaScript works. If we want it to do something for us, that means we are going to have this mindset that what we need to do is to create something that looks like a brain. We need, first of all, feed it with information. Because without that information, it cannot work. It is the information that it uses to do task. Okay? The information, it uses it to do what? Task. And that task is doing, for example, for this particular web page here, that you see something is moving, there is information given to it and instructions on how to do it. And that is this output you're seeing that it is doing it. Okay? It is the same thing with you. What you do is as a result of the processing of that information, your brain already know. The informations your brain already know. So the kind of information you can take as a human being, your brain can take. It can take even gesture, all right? It can even take signals. It can take words. It can take numbers, right? It can take logics, logical reasoning. For example, if I ask you to go to the market, buy me fruits, okay? But if there is money remaining, use it to buy whatever you want. Now, the information I've given you, I gave you everything. And you are now going to make a logical reasoning, because when you get to the market, there is a condition attached to you using the money to buy whatever you want. So it is after you buy the fruit, you can, so your information also has logical instinct. These patterns is what we want to know how to represent. We want to represent it, okay? So there are kinds of information we are going to look at when we talk of JavaScript, all right? So these concepts, these are called concepts, okay? So there are some things, we'll be introducing. They are new to you, right? We call it concepts, okay? These are something you have to know. They are something that is very important for you to know about something. For example, if we come to CSS, right? We say we want to learn layout. A layout is a concept. See it as a concept in a Java, in a CSS you need to learn so that you know how to lay out some things. We say we want to learn, let's say something like a media query in CSS, right? Is a concept, because it's not just a part of, it's not just something it's not like you are learning tags. Even tags is a concept, okay? These are different things you learn. So in JavaScript, we must learn some concepts, and we are going to start with what we call variable. It's going to sound somehow to you, especially if you are still new. But let me say this. Variables are just containers. You have variables in your brain as you are now, but you don't know, okay? You have billions of cells in your brain, and each information you are taking is being stored somewhere in your brain. That is the fact. If you see somebody with traumatic brain injury, most times they come down forgetting the names of their siblings, or forgetting some part of things, or maybe they even do some repeated movements, or for example, they can even forget their own names. All right? Sometimes you just tell the person, how are you? The person says, I'm fine. Have you eaten? I'm fine. I'm fine. It becomes the only information they can be able to reproduce. So each information you are taking is being stored somewhere. It's not just scattering everywhere in your brain. Don't think that if I ask you what is your name, you say my name is Chisom Eze. You said it from just one mouth, and you feel like the whole of your brain is occupying the whole of your brain. No, a part of your brain is holding that information, and you just retrieved it from that particular part of your brain. So JavaScript as a brain, we need to have a container for storing the information that is going to use to work. That container is called a variable. We call it a variable. Okay, we call it variable. For example, if you want to have a variable in JavaScript, there is a way you define it. Okay, there is a way you define it. And variables in JavaScript, I've told you, we use it to store information. We can reuse information stored in it, okay? And some other things we are going to see later. But there are ways we store variable. For example, if I want to create a container, which is a variable that holds, okay, let me assume this is a brain, and let me use the brain of human being, for example. I want to send you an error. Go to market, buy rice 200. Okay, buy 200 naira rice. Okay, go to the market, buy 200 naira rice. This is information. You took it and you stored it somewhere in the part of your brain. Now, let's see how we can store it here. All right. I can say that the information, we can call it message. All right. Equal to, this is not equal to, but permit me to use equal to at this particular stage. When we get to the time we should explain what it means, you can now be able to know. Okay. I have quotation. Let me say, go to the market and buy 200 naira worth rice. Okay. Let me remove this. Okay. I believe you can see my screen. Now you see that this is an information I've given this to hold, which is going to use. That's what it's going to use. You see that when you reach the market, your brain will not forget that you say go to the market and buy 200 naira rice, right? Why? Why didn't you forget? The reality is because you saved it somewhere in your brain. Imagine when somebody sends you this kind of an errand, you reach halfway, you say, I forgot to know. What did this person send? What happened? You received the information. When the person was telling you this, you heard everything the person was saying, but you didn't store it. That's what is happening. You didn't store it. There was no variable you created, and you didn't store it. And for that reason, you forgot it. So you have to go back. All right. So now we have created a variable, but JavaScript doesn't allow us to create a variable just like this. Okay. It's not okay to create a variable just like this. There is a way that is going to signify to it, this is a variable. We are just having a way to tell JavaScript that this is a variable, to know that this message is a variable, that this message is the name of a variable. All right. So we can't just do it this way. So that brings us to 3 keywords we can use to create a variable. Okay. 3 keywords we can use to create a variable. This is, first of all, before I continue, if you want to comment in JavaScript file, you can use this for single line commenting. You see, we are on line 3 now. I want to comment something. Number 1, we call it var. Number 2, we say let. Of course, it's small letter. None of them is capital letter. Okay. So number 3, we say what? Const. All right. Now, this thing is just an extra way of telling JavaScript the kind of data we want to have. Okay. And of course, the kind of data we want it to store. from the name, you can predict what is going on. But let's see what is happening. I'm going to copy this part, cut it entirely, come at the bottom here and paste it. Now, if you want to create a variable in JavaScript, you can use var. Okay, so you start with a var. This is like, see it like, okay, JavaScript, this message is a what? Variable. Let's see it that way. For now, JavaScript, this name message is a variable. That is what you are saying. So now JavaScript appreciates, oh, I know this is a variable. Okay, it's just you storing something. Okay, I'm aware of that. Okay, so what if we also duplicate this, for example, and we use let's? Okay, still fine, JavaScript knows. We use const, still fine, JavaScript knows. All right, now somebody might want to ask, what are the differences? Okay, what are the differences between these three things? If in the olden days, before we have what we call ES6 syntax, what we call ES rules, of course, you just have to see this thing as version for now. Just see it as the latest upgrade of something. They call it ES6, ECMAScript. Okay, this is what maintains the specification, JavaScript specification. And of course, for example, tomorrow, let me take, for example, you have a version today. Tomorrow you have another version. Next tomorrow you have another version. So the latest version where we are now is ES6. Okay, ECMAScript. So before then, we used var to declare variables. Okay, and that was even when we talked about when we called everything variables. Okay, var, you see, this var stands for variable. That is a short form for it. You can't say variable in full. You can just say var. Okay, this let is just let like that, and const stands for constant. Okay, but we are going to look at how they all came to existence. Var is the old version of what we normally use. Okay, and of course this brings a lot of confusion because of what you are going to see in the future. It still exists, but nobody recommends you to use it. So I'm going to comment it. Okay, nobody uses that again. All right, we don't use it again to do anything. So of course I'm also going to okay, now let me just leave this error. For this let, what does let do? Let is just what is replacing var. Okay, is replacing var, but is now the modern version of it. Okay, is changeable. Okay, now variable is actually, the name is somehow misleading because we know that variable is signifies that it's something that is changeable. Okay, okay, something that is changeable, and that is what this is. So if we say that this let message is this at this point, we can come down and say that message is now hello. That is what we mean that it can change. Okay, the value of this variable can change. The value of it can change. So we can use let. But when a value cannot change, when the program is running, you see that we can use let. What we can use is const. This const means constant. And of course, variable declaration like this, for you to be able to define a variable like this, there are rules to it. So we cannot be able to have two things we are defining. If you have called a variable message at the time we are defining it here, you cannot come down and say let message again. Okay, you can only reassign. Okay, this term I use, reassign, just means for you to, you see that instead of go to the market, get this thing, I'm now adding hello. So I've reassigned the value, the information that is contained in the message with another value, right? That is the reassigning. But we cannot have the same name being declared with two different variable keywords, okay? So instead of this, let me say message 2, okay? Let me call this one message 1. You see that the error has disappeared, right? Now, what is the difference between the let and the const? I told you this cannot be able to reassign, and I will give you an example. For example, in this particular class where we are, if somebody asks you how many students are currently in the class now, you say, okay, how many people are here? You say 6, right? That's a fixed, that is a number, but it is not fixed. This number can change. Somebody can join the class, somebody can leave, and it fluctuates. So it can reduce to 5, 2, 1, it can increase to 7, 8, 9, right? So a variable that is holding this information cannot be defined with const, okay? We cannot say const, okay, let me say const users, because we are users, equal to 6, all right? That is because when somebody joins, you see that these users now will be 7, all right? Sorry. These users will be 7, okay? These users will be 7, right? So we cannot be able to do something like this. Let me say, let me even say hello, okay? Or reassign it. Now, const does not allow us to do this, okay? It does not allow us to do this. When there is incoming, the data is changing, okay? We cannot do this. What we can use is what? Let. We can use let because it allows us to be flexible with the kind of, that is what I consider as a variable, to be honest with you, because the value varies. Sorry to say this. Okay, so that is what we can see here. The let and const, they are used. So if you look at a variable that is created, all right, we have 4 parts to it. First of all is the keyword. Second is the name. Then third is this thing that looks like equal sign, but we call it assignment. Assignment operator. I will tell you guys what operator is later in our classes, but not today. But just see it as an assignment stuff. Okay, it's used to assign this to this. Okay, so what is this? This becomes the value, right? This becomes the value. So these are the parts of what? This particular variable. Now, if you understand this variable in this particular way, we also have some rules, like starting a variable name with what? A number is not allowed. You see, if I hover over this, you see, could not find name message 1, okay? Cannot immediately follow a numeric, right? So we cannot use a number to do this, right? But we can have a number at the back of this, all right? Also, we cannot be able to use this kind of minus symbol. Let's say we want to say, let me create another variable here. Let me say, let full name equal to Mark Chizoba, right? Now you see that there is an issue, okay? Because this is a special thing to JavaScript. We cannot just use it like this. It's not going to work, right? It's not going to work. So these are some things we need to know. So there is how we normally represent all this. You can put it this way. There is no issue. You don't have issue with this, okay? But there are ways we maintain a convention to be able to have a unique thing in the development community, okay? You are not the only one who is going to be reading your code. Another person is going to. So we have a standard, what we follow to do this. So we have something we call camel case. And camel case is just like camel. You know camel, how the back used to come up, all right? So what does it tell us? If we have to create a variable name that is like a 2-syllabic word, okay? Or let me say 3. It says that the first word starts with small letter, other words start with capital letter. So here we have 2 separate words that can be separate like this. Of course, we cannot do this, okay? We cannot separate it like this. It doesn't work like that. So it must be together. So, but these are 2 different words. And if we want to maintain, because one of the things we consider when we want to create a variable is that the variable name has to be descriptive. It has to tell you what the value is all about. So you don't name full name and coming here, you are putting 7. Do you understand? It doesn't happen that way. So we can have full name to be Mark. Okay, let me say Mark. All right. So how do we solve this issue? We use camel case, and that camel case is that if this is 2-syllabic words, we can say capital letter N, and we join it like this. This is camel case notation, camel case syntax we are using to write the name of the variable, right? If this should be 3, let's say we want to create something like a input for username. Let me say input for username. Let me say input. So you see, I'm going to say input for. Of course, this is what we have for username. Okay, username has to be together, of course. All right. So in this particular situation, you see that if I want to join it, this has to come closer. I add it camel case. This also come closer. I add it camel case. Everything works. But there is another version we can also use, and that is underscore, using underscore. So we can, instead of say using camel case, if you don't want to use camel case, and we want it to be readable, okay, we can have underscore, okay, we can also have underscore. So this thing is allowed. And of course, I want to believe that this is more readable to you, maybe input for username. So it's more readable, all right? So this is the kind of thing we imbibe when we are talking of variables in JavaScript, right? Now, we have understood this aspect called the keyword. We also understood this aspect called the variable name. We also understood in part this word, this part which we call assignment operator. But we are yet to understand why is it that this part we having it in double quotation, and why is it that this one is just like this? What does it add any meaning to what you are doing? That is a very valid question, and that is one step forward to your understanding of what the basics and the basic principles of JavaScript. All right, so now we are now talking of shifting the attention to the value itself. We as humans, right, we speak English language, right? It's a language. And of course, how we speak English is that we make use of what? Words, normal words, right? We use words. We also use numbers, because when you told somebody to go and buy something, 200, right? This is a number. And this number, why is it a number? It can increase, it can decrease. After buying the fruit, you see that this value 200 is going to decrease. Of course, you see that this value self, we should store it in a variable. Okay. Now, if you understand this pattern, you notice that your brain as a human being takes words, it stores words, it stores numbers, it stores logical thinking. It also stores some other things. For example, another thing it stores is a list. If I tell you to go and get me something like fruits, something like mango, cashew, and orange, this is a list I have created for you. And your brain is going to store it, right? It's going to store it because I have told you what to buy. You buy mango, you buy cashew nuts, then you buy what? Orange. 3 items is a list. So your brain has a way to store it. So we should also talk of how do we store lists in JavaScript. Another thing you should think of is if I ask you to describe yourself to me, what are you going to say? I'm a male, fair in complexion, tall, this, that, okay? This is you describing your your properties, okay? You are describing your properties. You have properties as a human being. And why do you have properties? Because there is what we call objects. Every object in this world has properties. You are an object. Forget the fact that sometimes we are saying, okay, we say the objects, we know that objects are, in some cases, we say it's non-living things, okay? Right? Something like car is an object. And of course, car has properties, right? You can tell the make. This is Toyota, black in color, and some other stuff you can use to describe it, right? That makes it an object, right? This kind of information is stored in your brain the same way we can store it. So these are different kinds of what we call data types in JavaScript. The types of data the program can take. It is something you have to understand. Okay? If somebody from China comes to you, right, and speaks something, all right, you cannot be able to process it, right? Because your brain has not been programmed to process it. It can't take it, it can't store it, it cannot even make any meaning from it. That is your brain. It cannot be configured. The same way with JavaScript. There are things that have been configured for you to take, and that's the data types, the kinds of data it can work with. So if you are bringing data that is in another form, it won't use it. It's going to stick with the data types it knows. And this data type is unique to what kind of data type our brain, human beings, we process, right? So data types describe what kind of information we are storing. The kind of information we are storing. In 2 large categories, we have primitive data types and complex data types, okay? Primitive data types and complex data types, okay? So the question becomes, what are the differences? Primitive data types store single values in a variable. Single values in a variable. For example, this particular one I have here, you see that this is just a single value containing characters, okay? That is stored here. This also is a single value here. But what happens in the list I created? Buy me orange, buy me cashew nut, and mango. This is not a single data type you are storing, right? You are storing a list of data, right? You are storing a list of data. And what happens when I say describe yourself? You're telling me your name, your age, this, that, right? These are different data you are telling me, which is not single. is a collection of data, right? A collection of data. So when we have these ones that are in collections, not stored in single, we call it complex data types, okay? But when we have the one we store in single format, we call it simple or primitive data types, okay? So we can say that data types, oh, sorry, let me comment this. Data types. We have, of course, another way we can be able to comment. You see that this is single line comment. And if I come down here and write something, it doesn't cover it. It only knows anything, everything in this line. So we can be able to add multiple line comments, okay? Just do this, add asterisks like this, add another asterisk, and you are okay, and close it with a forward slash. Now, this particular thing I've written, I can take it down to many lines of code, and anything I write in between, irrespective of where it is regarded as a comment. A comment in JavaScript is that part of code that doesn't get executed. When the browser is interpreting it, it overlooks it because it treats it like a comment. Even if you write a very beautiful logic here, it can never be called. It doesn't know about it. That is comment in JavaScript. All right. So at this point, we see that we have created this, and of course, let's just cut this because we need this to be in multiple line comments. So we can write some things. Okay, so I can add number 1. We say we have primitive. Okay, number 2, we also have complex or compound. Okay, anything you call it, but let it become something, right? Sorry for that. Complex, right? Let me just leave it like this. Okay, so what are the primitive data types? I've already told you they store single values, all right? So these single values can be number. This is a number, right? It can be number. So it can be one of the types of primitive data type we are going to be seeing is called what? Number, all right? And also you see that this is just a text. This one is just a text. Mark is just a text. How do we know that it's just a text? It is in quotation. You see that even though I added this, in fact, this particular 6, if I add it in quotation now, it becomes a text, no longer a number. It becomes a text, no longer a number. Now, somebody can ask, is it only double quote? What of single quote? You are free to use single quote, but don't confuse yourself by opening with single quote or opening with double quote and ending with just single quote. It has to be consistent. All right. And there is a third kind of quotation, which we are going to see later, but I don't want us to confuse ourselves at this point. Let's maintain it this way. Just know that anything in quotation, any value in quotation is treated as what? As a normal text, okay? Just like normal words we use, like this I'm speaking, it's normal word. I cannot calculate something with it, see it that way, all right? So that particular kinds of data that are represented in this form, we call it string, okay? Then we have number 3. Okay. Now, this particular data, you see that there was something I messaged this person, go to the market and buy this thing. And if there is a balance, use it to buy anything for yourself. It's a conditional stuff that I gave it. All right. And JavaScript has a way of achieving this. All right. You see that if I come to this application, the reason you are seeing that I'm not logged in here is because, sorry, the reason you are seeing that we don't have that particular dashboard here. Initially, we had a dashboard here before I logged that, all right? Now, if I load this application, by default, you are going to see that the dashboard is still here. All right, the dashboard is still here. And there are other things. For example, if I come to this sign up, you see that if I click this, something happens. These things that are appearing, they are under some condition, right? They are under some condition because they don't just appear. If I have filled in my name, Mark, do you think this will appear? Let me click this. You see that that message has disappeared and there is a tick mark here that I have entered this. This one also is under a condition. We see this thing every day, right? We see this thing every day. So that is, JavaScript also has a way of making a decision, taking a decision, logical reasoning to reason, okay? And that is what we call Boolean data type, okay? Boolean. So Boolean is all about true or false, okay? We are going to look at all these things in details. This is just introductory part, but obviously I'm telling you guys everything you need to know here. All right. So Boolean is just about true or false. For example, if I say const is class ongoing, okay, you say true. All right. Do you understand? Is class ongoing? We say true because class is ongoing. But there is a situation whereby class can be what? False. Right? Now, the beauty is this. Somebody can use, JavaScript can use this thing to also make some decisions, to also take some actions, to also make some logical things, take a decision on its own. Because we can say that if class is false, okay, do this. If is a class ongoing, if class is ongoing, let me just say if is class ongoing is false, right? Do something. If it is true, do something, right? That is maybe if we have this recording, okay, that this recording is automatic. Let's say it's automatic. Immediately I enter this class, it starts recording. All right. That means it is waiting for a class, for a condition. It's there. The logic is there. It's just waiting for me to start this class. Once I start the class, it's going to start recording. So it's checking, is this class ongoing? If it is ongoing, it starts recording. If it's not ongoing, it doesn't record. So that is decision it is making. That is decision it's making. So also, we use it everywhere. Most of these buttons, all of them depend on conditions, okay? Toggling between this and that. If I click volume off, you see that this will, you will not be able to hear me again. If I click start, you will be able to hear me again. Maybe in your dashboard now, you see that if you have made payment, you should be able to be seeing some links. You should be able to be seeing some links to video recording and some other things there. But if you've not made payment, you will see that you will still see it there. Some messages you are seeing there, some displays you are seeing on your dashboard about payment stuffs, or maybe you have not done this, you have done this. It's because of the conditions. Okay? It's because of the condition. You can't be having make payments on your dashboard when you have made payments because of condition. Okay, it has to be conditions because this we see it everywhere, every day. We human beings, we can process it, but we don't even know. Sometimes you can ask your junior brother when it is raining, please, I want you to pack in my clothes. It is under a condition because the person cannot just pack your clothes. The person has to wait when it is raining, right? Or you tell somebody when you are hungry, go to the kitchen and get something and eat. The person is under a condition. We use it every day. Our application also has a way to do it because we say that the JavaScript is a brain. It should be able to take information. You should be able to store information. You should be able to process information. You should be able to give out information. These are the concepts you have to understand. And when we now progress to advanced levels, it makes sense to you, right? So if we come back to this particular stage, we see that we have already defined 3 data types, but are they all? No, they are not all. So let us expand this particular stuff here. Let me say, instead of having all these things here, okay, let's say const message 2. Okay, I'm going to call this 1 and call this 2 equal to this. All right, let me say buy something for yourself. Okay, buy something for yourself. All right, now I'm also going to have, okay, let me even call this in message part 1. Okay, message part 2. Then let me have, these are just the parts of the message, take it that way. Message parts 3 equal to, right, this. Okay, now I'm just going to copy this particular one, have it here. All right, let me remove this mark, or let me just leave it, but of course you know why we have it. Let me just comment this. All right, so what I'm going to do here is that for this message part 2, we are going to say 200, because this is a number. So I'm just going to remove this. Okay, all right, okay. So now what I have here, I have this. So let me just copy this and place it here. Let me call this condition. Of course, this is not naming right, but I just want a very nice illustration here. All right, and buy rice. Okay, okay. So let's say I'm just trying to make out meaning out of this. But for example, let's say what I'm sending this person is go to the market and buy rice 200, right? Buy something for yourself. Okay, this is the condition. Buy me something 200. If there is a balance remaining, that is this condition now coming in place, then you buy yourself this. Okay, buy yourself something. Now we see that this thing this person wants to buy, the person doesn't actually know what he wants to buy, right? He doesn't know what he wants to buy, but he knows he's going to buy something if there is balance, right? So this particular thing, we can remove it, right? Of course, we cannot say const, because const, you must assign a value to it. So it cannot take undefined, right? So we can have this like this. What does this mean? This is another data type, okay, which we call another primitive data type, which we call what? Undefined. Okay, why is it undefined? It is unknown, but the variable has been created. There is a container waiting for something to be added in it. There is a container waiting for something to be added in it. You see that this doesn't hold a value. Of course, this semicolon is just telling us that this is the end of this statement. We are going to look at what statement is later and some other things, but this is just telling us this is the end of this stuff here. Okay, so there is nothing coming after it. So if this happens like this, I can even add another code here. For example, I can copy this, come after this, and paste it. Okay, of course we are, let me just say 2. Okay, but what happens if I remove this? You see, there is an error because this is treated as a single line of code, right? And this syntax doesn't exist. This is just like me creating a variable called message part3 const condition. This is treated as a variable, but because I've used a way we are not authorized to do, to create it by having a space instead of having underscore or camel case, is now seeing it as an error, right? But if I add this semicolon, it is telling JavaScript that this is a different thing altogether. Okay, this is a different thing, this is a different thing. All right, do you have any question?
Yes, sir. The screen. We are not seeing anything. Okay.
Is it
Just
true
come
with
up. Now when you are
everybody?
talking, it was not showing anything.
Has it been long?
We are not seeing anything in the screen.
Can you see it now?
Yes. Well, but when you were talking before, it was not showing. It was not showing
Okay,
anything. It was showing the next column.
all right. Others, is it showing on your end? Okay, okay, let's write on. All right, so I believe you know why we have semicolon here. All right, you must have it when, especially when you are having multiple things in one line like this, that you don't want to end just like that. But all these ones we are supposed to add it, right? Semicolon, semicolon. This is the best practice. But in the olden days, it used to give issues if you don't add it, but JavaScript already know that this is the end. Once you don't have anything else after it, it knows that you have closed it. So it doesn't give errors, even if you add or you don't add it, but you can just be adding it. All right. But I don't like adding it because it looks somehow. Okay. So this is what we can be able to achieve. And we see that we have created variables for this message we want JavaScript to use to process the information for us. All right. So at this particular point, we see that we are just saying, go to the market and buy rice, 200. And if there is balance, buy whatever you like. That is what you are saying here. We don't know what you want to buy, but we know that this is going to exist. And why it is so is because this might be reassigned in the future. For example, after you have gone to the market, you discover that there was a balance, then you buy yourself Apple. Okay, so you see that we have reassigned this variable with Apple. Here it was undefined, at this point it becomes defined. We now have a value to it. So that is it. So if you use something like const, it is an error because of what? Because we are trying to create this, and we say that const cannot be reassigned. And what we mean by having an unassigned variable like this, undefined, is what? That we are going to reassign it in the future. That's what it means. We are going to reassign. So JavaScript is saying, no, you have told me to create a variable that is called message part3 that is going to code a constant. Why now are you not adding something to it? Why are you telling me that later you are still going to reassign? If that's the case, use let, don't use const. Okay, so if I hover here, you see that we have const declarations must be initialized. Okay, we have variable declaration and initialization. And of course, if you create a variable like this and add a value to it at the time of creation, you are creating and initializing it at the same time, right? It doesn't mean that we cannot create one without initializing. We can do that later, right? But if we must do this, we must do it with let. Okay? I'm saying must. So you should understand it. So this works fine, and we are now be able to appreciate that we have what? How many data types now? We have 4 for what? For primitive data types. Now there is the third one I'm going to tell us, and that is called null. Okay, null. What does null offer to us? Null is just telling us that what? Empty. It is empty on purpose. We want it to be empty. For example, you tell this person, go to the market and buy rice, 200. And if there is change, if there is balance, don't buy anything. Okay? Don't buy. So you are telling this person not to buy anything. All right? So it is not undefined because we already know the value. The value is nothing. The value is what? Nothing. So how can we represent it? You can just be able to say something like what? Null. But this, of course, is not what we see often, because you can't just create a variable and say null. We calculate it, right? So this is how we can be able to create this, call it null. This is just telling us that this does not have anything, okay? If you go to the market, there is a balance. Don't buy yourself anything. Okay, that is this null all about. So that becomes the 5th primitive data type we are seeing today. Okay, the 5th primitive data type we are seeing today. You see that all these things are just what we human beings we can use. Okay, all these things are just what we can be able to use here, right? We human beings, primitive data types, that is what we can be able to use. That's what we use on daily basis for communication. You say something like, go and buy me something. Let's meet at 6 o'clock. Do this. You use most of all these data types to process because it's already stored in your brain. Okay, you don't just start using 6 o'clock. The 6 is stored somewhere. Okay, all those words you are using, they are stored somewhere. If they are not stored somewhere, you cannot use it. A child doesn't just start speaking. He starts learning language. And as he learns language, what is the learning? What is actually the learning? The learning is coding of those things in the brain, storing it somewhere in the brain. So when the person now starts speaking, you feel like he's just speaking. No, he's bringing it out from somewhere. And our brain can house as many as information it wants to house. Can learn how many languages it can still take it, right? So that is it for primitive data types. And now when we now talk of complex data types, I've given you an instance, a list. For example, of course, today we are not going to deal with them in full, like to tell what this is, what that is, right? That is not our business for today. But we are just going to expose these kinds of data types so that you become aware of it. As we keep on progressing, you will now be able to know how we can use them, how we can manipulate them, because of course, we are going, like this I'm speaking, I'm manipulating words. I'm not just speaking, I'm manipulating words. I'm joining, I'm realigning. This is what I'm doing, manipulating those values, those informations in my brain. So we can now be able to tell, how can we be able to play along? Our program can be able to play along with all this information. We want it to store for us. Okay. So first of all, when you tell this person, you are not now telling the person, okay, let me change this rice to fruit, not fruit. Let me change it to orange. Okay. So at this point, you see that we're just telling this person to buy one particular stuff. Of course, we can still be able to break this into another thing. Let me say, let me take it like this. Part 0. Okay. Now, this part 0 doesn't have orange. Okay. This one, I just want it to be a bit clearer. That's why I'm doing this. Okay. Now, this is what is holding the fruit. All right. Okay. Or we can even say item to buy. Okay, make some item to buy. Okay, item to buy becomes orange, right? That's great. Now, what happens when you say buy me orange, mango, and apple? What happens? Of course, you say, let us say orange, mango, and what? Or let's even add a comma, okay? And what? Apple. Now, this can be tempting, but here is the deal. This is just a single data, okay? This is treated as a single data, all right? It is not treated as multiple things. This is just a single unit of data. So this thing you are seeing, orange, mango, apple, it's just a statement. It's just something that is existing together. So you can't actually be able to isolate each of them and say, okay, you want mango. You can't refer to mango or apple or orange separately here because it's just one thing. So if you are looking at creating a list, the best way to do this is to say, let's say const fruits, okay, to buy, all right? We can now have a syntax that defines a list. If you want JavaScript to save a list and to interpret a list, you must follow a syntax. Just like we wanted it to have access to text, just like this, we followed the syntax. If we come here and remove this quotation here, right, you see that we are breaking the rule. This is no longer a value. This is no longer a value. It doesn't treat it as a value at this point, okay? Of course, we can still be able to link something when variables communicating with another variable. But at this point, this is not a value, okay? It is not a value because we are not following the syntax. It is not a text because we are not following the syntax for what? Text, okay? That is what I wanted to say, sorry. It is not a text because we are not following the syntax. The syntax says that if you want to define a text, you have to add it in quotation, single or double, or another one, which we are going to see. All right. So that is it. So if we must create a list for JavaScript, we have to follow the syntax. The quickest and the recommended way is to just create what? Angle bracket. Is just to open a bracket like this. All right. So here now we can now be able to list those things we want to buy. So we can say orange, comma, mango, comma, apple. Okay. So you see that this becomes a single what? A single text. This also becomes a single text. So here you can see that we have three things here. We have three texts. Is that a question?
Yes, the screen is showing next college. It's not showing anything
Please,
again.
how many people can see my screen?
Here you are, it's on now.
Please, it should be your network, because I believe, is it the same thing with everybody? Can somebody please unmute and tell me if you have been experiencing the same thing?
So it's showing next college now.
No, I think it's your network. Just go off the call and rejoin again.
Please, you can just rejoin. It should be your network. All right. So you see, we have created a list. This is a list. This is how we create a list. Okay. This is how we create a list. There is another way of creating it, but we are going to see it later. And trust me, this is how we are going to be creating it onwards. As simple as that. Just add the bracket, you are done. You can add the list of things you want to add here, right? So somebody can now be able to, you see that this particular one doesn't make sense because this is a single thing we are having with characters. And here now we have 1, we have 2, we have 3. So you see that even this comma we added inside here is being treated like just normal text. But here you see that the color changed, and this is telling us that this is a list. Okay. Now this list in JavaScript, we call it array. So is the first member is the first member of the complex or compound data type we are seeing. Array data type. Okay, so whenever you are hearing array, just know that we are saying list. Just take it that way. So this is, it has a special name. All these things, you see, numbers, all these things are just names we give it in JavaScript, which you must name it. It is not optional. Okay, so if you must write in JavaScript, you have to call it what we want it to call it. That's the rule. Okay, so this is what a list we have created, and this list is called an array. All right. Now, the last and important data type we are going to look at inside this complex is when I told you, when somebody say, okay, somebody say, I want you to get me, I want you to get me a handset, okay, of Apple brand within 400,000 naira and black in color. Okay. What else? Okay. From a particular store, let's say Chisom's store. Okay. Now, this is not just, the person is not giving you a list of items to buy. Okay. The person is describing what he or she wants you to buy. This is how we see objects. Just like what I explained, something like a car, you talk of the brand, your laptop, you talk of the make, you talk of some other things you need to talk about it, right? So that is object. So for example, let's take the phone you want to buy, const, let's say, call it phone, all right, equal to. Now, how do we create object in JavaScript? How do we create object? An object is created using this curly braces. This is called curly braces. It looks like a bracket, but you see how it is. Curly braces. It is the thing you click when you press shift, shift and this bracket. Okay, that is curly braces. This is an object I have created, and this is an array I have created. All right. So what is the structure? Of course, you see that if we see human being as an object, for example, you have color, you have height, you have a gender, you have name. For example, let us even use student, for example. Who is of course, student is a human being. All right. Now, this particular student, we see that this person has a name. All right. The name of a person is a string. Okay. So we can say something like what? Chisum. All right. We give a comma. We talk of another property. All right. We call it gender. All right. We say that the gender is what? Female. Okay. Another property is what? Let's say color. Okay. What's the color? Let's say fair in complexion. We have so many things that can define her, right? Likes, what she likes, her hobbies, some of all these things that are street, address. Can talk of address, right? Other things. So this is the syntax for what? For objects. When I say syntax, whenever you hear me say syntax, I mean the structure of how we define something. Okay? The structure you must follow when you want to define a particular thing. If I say this is the syntax for array, it means that if you want to create an array, you have to use this bracket notation. If I say this is the syntax for object, when you want to write object, you have to use this particular curly braces, right? If you are talking about syntax for string, you have to add it in quotation, all right? If you're talking of syntax for numbers, you cannot include numbers in quotation. If you include it, this automatically becomes a what? A string. So numbers are not in what? Quotation. So this is a syntax. Now let's examine this syntax. We already know what const stands for. We already know what student stands for. We already know what this assignment operator stands for. Then this curly braces is what I already told you. This is what tells us that this is an object we want to define. Now, there is something strange here, because when we talked about the list of items, you see that what we just have is the value. We just have to add the values, all right? But here, we are creating something that looks similar. This looks somehow like somebody saying const name equal to this. This looks like primitive data type repackaged in another form, right? Repackaged in another, because if we just say name like this, what is the difference? Because this is the property's name and this is the value. Okay, so that is how it is. Object is represented in what we call key value pairs. Key value pairs. The key is the name of the property. The value remains the value. So key value pair for this particular first property here is what? The key is name, the value is Chisom. For this second property here, the key is gender, the value is female. For the color property here, the key is color, the value is fair. That is understandable, right? That is understandable. Somebody might ask some questions, but what I want you to understand, to take home today, is that when we come to JavaScript, we are looking at a way of reasoning, thinking, seeing it as a brain. We need to feed it with information. It has to process, use it, those information. Of course, at this point, we are just storing. You can agree with me that what we are doing here is that we are just giving the storage of what it can work. With everything we have here, you see that this particular thing can speak like a human being, because it can make logical reasoning, arrive at a conclusion using this if false or true statement, which is a boolean. It can also decide to code back stuff using the undefined. It can also say, okay, I don't want it to be defined. It can also be able to do something that, say something that is about list, something that is object, normal, something that is yes, all these things, normal text, which is the primitive. This is the information we have added. So after these things, we can now be able to look at how does it use it? How does JavaScript use this information that it has to give us the output? Okay, how does it use it to give us the output? Will become the next question, all right? So, but today you have been able to understand that even as we think of having informations, we must follow a certain rule. And for you to follow a certain rule, you must know of a variable. This is the first concept we have to know. What is a variable? A variable is a container that holds the value, information, all right, data, all right. Now, variable cannot just be named. You have to use a keyword. We have 3 keywords we can use to name a variable, and JavaScript, we appreciate that this is a variable. First one is var, let and const, all right. Var is the old version, which we don't use again. Let is the new version, but the const and let are the new versions. There is a difference. Difference is that you can reassign, you can reassign a value to a let, but you cannot reassign a value to a const. Const means constant. So once you know that a value is going to be hold a constant, you don't need to define it with let. In most cases, when we start advancing, we're going to be using more of const and some other stuff. All right. So once you have known this, you see that another thing you have to know is that naming a variable follows a particular convention. All right. So you cannot start with a number. It can only be camel case or underscores, or you use numbers at the last. You can use some special characters. All right. So you can just look at it. And of course, you know how to comment single line in JavaScript. And you know how to comment multiple line in JavaScript. And of course, you know that this thing is not equal. This doesn't mean equal sign, you know, in mathematics, right? This is assignment. This is telling us that this value has been assigned to this variable, all right? We also saw that we have to, that this particular part is called a value, and this is a data. And there are data types a JavaScript can understand. These data types are in two categories, the primitive and the complex data types. What are the primitive? There are 5: numbers, strings, boolean, undefined, and null. The compound, array, and the what? Objects. Okay? Array and the object. These are the two complex data types. Every other thing you are seeing on webs revolves around them. Okay? Of course, there are some other things, but every other thing, in most cases, every other thing revolves around them, either around number or any other thing. All right? I believe this class was a bit understanding. And if, of course, you see that we have not even started applying it on a web page, because the goal of JavaScript is that we should be able to fill it on the web page. All right? When you come to nextcollege.dev, you see that this is where we are seeing the impact. You see how this is counting. This is where we are seeing the impact. We have to fill it, right? So we have to apply it on our application. So this particular application, we have built the landing page. We have to apply it on them and maybe change some things, hide some things, do some things. But before then, you need to understand these basics. All right? So that is it for today. And I want to entertain questions at this point. All right? Do you have any question, guys? Any questions so far?
Using the boats.
Okay, Toby, go ahead.
Okay, so yes, I understand the data types, the number, boolean, undefined, null, array, and string. So my question is that how do you apply these data types in a real life scenario? Probably when creating a project, when building a project.
Okay, I understand your question. And one thing you have to know is that we are taking it gradually. All right. I've just given you what you need to learn is what I just taught you. Okay. What you're asking is like, how do we now start writing backend, even all those things? Okay. So if we have taught you this part I'm teaching you now, when we were doing HTML, do you understand? It's going to be bulky for you. And of course, you see that we progress. That HTML now, you have passed that stage and you understand it, past CSS, and now you are starting JavaScript. When you started HTML, you didn't just start by learning input feed, input and the rest of them. Or when you started CSS, you didn't just start by learning media query. You started by learning the basics, how to even link it with your application. So that is where we are now. We are going to look at all these things. That is why we are here. But it has to be gradual, taken step by step. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other question, guys? This is 9 o'clock. Any other question? Okay. So if we don't have any other question again, is that a question? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, sir. You said this is just the example first. So I believe my next class will understand all those number, train, bowling, and underfy. You know, and my screen. Sometimes I was complaining about I was not seeing some things.
Okay,
You
okay.
understand? So towards the end, that's where I was getting the issue.
Okay, so it's
So
not
I
like
believe
you
by
have a
next class we will understand those.
okay.
You know, you are
Yes, as
saying it
we
now.
keep
It's somehow strange. It's
all
somehow
right,
strange. Right?
all right, all right. I get your question.
No
I
problem, sir.
get your concern. I get your concern. As we keep on going, everything will become clear. Just as like when if you are new to web development, when we started HTML, everything was just like sounding somehow. But of course, you see, here we are, right? Here we are, and you already know it. So it's meant to sound this way to you because this is the first time. This is language. Imagine if somebody is teaching you Hausa for the first time. Do you think your brain is going to assimilate it? What's the same thing that is happening to your brain that is happening here because you are learning the language of a machine and you are trying to know how machine. It's not even how your own brain is going to save the information, but how machine saves their own information. That is it. So we are going to understand, just exercise some patience as we keep on going, we get to understand it. It gets to become clear. That's okay, right? Okay. Do you have any other question, guys? All right. So since we don't have any other question, let's see again in our next class. And of course, please rewatch this video and try and practice. All right. See you again and have a very wonderful night rest. Good night.